And joining us on the broadcast is Ambassador John Bolton, who's been former assistant to the President for National Security Affairs and former United States Ambassador to the United Nations. Mr. Bolton, first up, your views on India's deep strike against terror hubs deep inside Pakistan. How do you see New Delhi's stand that it has a legitimate right to self-defense when faced with the threat of terrorism?
Terrorist attack in Kashmir, India certainly had a right to exercise its capacity for self-defense and did so by striking the camps from which it believed the terrorist attacks emanated. And in that sense, it was very similar to what happened in 2019 when I was National Security Advisor. From that point, the situation escalated, and there was certainly legitimate reason for India to think that Pakistan was not only not controlling the problem of terrorism on its own territory, but was in effect defending the terrorist act itself. I'm glad certainly that it didn't escalate any further, but the right of self-defense means exactly what it says, and countries that don't understand that, I think, act at their peril.
Mr. Bolton, can you also share how India called Pakistan's nuclear bluff, and how safe is Pakistan's nuclear arsenal given its political instability has been amply clear time and again, and the very fact that military dictates everything in Pakistan?
I think there's always a risk of instability when there are long-standing conflicts between two nuclear powers. I haven't seen evidence that the Pakistani nuclear arsenal itself is insecure. And going back 20 years to when I was in the George W. Bush administration, that was something that we followed very closely for obvious reasons. Nonetheless, I think when there are threats of terrorism involved, that everybody should be concerned that these weapons don't get into the hands of terrorists. That's one reason the United States has done what it could to prevent Iran from getting nuclear weapons, because the very severe risk that the government there would provide those weapons to terrorist groups. So I think this is remains a legitimate concern. I think it's something the United States and Pakistan should certainly stay in very careful touch about.
Mr. Bolton, India says that the ceasefire was reached after bilateral military talks that were held between the two DGMOs. Why do you think that President Donald Trump has been insisting that the truce is a result of US mediation, despite the Indian Foreign Ministry making it amply clear that this was not the case?
Trump likes to take credit for a lot of things, whether he deserves the credit or not. I think the calls that he made, Vice President Vance made, Secretary Rubio made, were hopefully helpful in de-escalating the confrontation. It's pretty clear to me that the decisive step was the call from the chief of the Pakistani military to his Indian counterpart that indicated that Pakistan wanted to get off the escalation ladder. But that's how Trump does things, and it's not particularly aimed at India or anybody else. He just loves to take credit for things.
Also, Mr. Bolton, if you can talk to us about how do you see China's role in the India-Pakistan conflict, given that Pakistan used Chinese weaponry which failed in combat?
The risk of increased Chinese influence in Pakistan is very real and very concerning. And the evidence of these Chinese fighters, their effort at a fifth-generation fighter, is proof of what's been publicly reported, that Pakistan buys as much as 80% of its sophisticated weapon systems from China these days. That's a real strong piece of evidence of Chinese influence. And I think you might attribute some of the tension here to China, that's using Pakistan as a proxy to increase tensions with India, to put a threat in place on India's western flank. I have seen those reports of Chinese intelligence and other assistance. I must say it wouldn't be surprising, given everything else that China has provided Pakistan over the years, including assistance with its nuclear program. We know that because when Libya gave up its quest for nuclear weapons and we received the plans they had gotten from A.Q. Khan of Pakistan for a nuclear weapons design, the plans were filled with Chinese markings. So we know ultimately where that came from. Again, this would be another piece of evidence that I think should be very concerning of the growth of Beijing's influence.
And a quick question on the Russia-Ukraine war as well, Mr. Bolton. Your views on the Trump-Putin phone call that was held, do you think the US mediation is actually working?
I think that the best conclusion we can reach based on what both Trump and Putin and their associates have said is that not much came out of that call, even though it lasted 2 hours. Now, that includes interpretation, obviously, but that's still a pretty long call. In fact, Yuri Yushakov, an advisor to Putin, said that the two of them didn't want to end the call. I guess they were having such a good time, but it didn't do anything for the ceasefire efforts between Ukraine and Russia. I think it bodes poorly for much longer involvement by President Trump. He said a number of times in the past month that if the ceasefire talks didn't begin to make progress, he would basically withdraw from them and leave it up to Ukraine and Russia. The real question is whether the United States continues to provide Ukraine with assistance, military assistance, weapons, ammunition, and the like. Trump hasn't really said anything one way or the other. My hope, obviously, is that we do continue to provide assistance, even if Trump walks away from the ceasefire negotiations. But at this point, we just don't know the answer to that. And that obviously is very important to Ukraine.
Mr. Bolton, quick last question before we let you go. How do you see Israel's renewed offensive in Gaza, as pressure has clearly been mounting on Netanyahu, who has pledged to eliminate Hamas?
The Israelis have allowed aid in fact, UN personnel are taking it in. I think that the fact of the matter is Hamas has been such a cancer among the residents of Gaza that they're never going to have a chance at a better life. And from a humanitarian point of view, it's critical that Hamas be ended as a political and military force, which is what the Israeli objective is. Obviously, they've got to follow the war, but it looks, from my perspective, like they have been.